when I was 5 years old, I almost died. I'm looking at an electrical cable up here. I took an electrical cable in our house, and I'm not sure what I was thinking consciously, but I stripped all the insulation off, and I walked over to a wall plug, and I put one side in one and the other side in the other, and held on for dear life. And it burned my hands, burned my face, burned all the hair off my face. It was, I'm lucky to be here. One of the consequences of that is that my body functions differently. When you survive that, your body functions differently. You metabolize a little bit differently. And I said to my mom at that time, I said, I'm on the 200-year plan. And I want to see how this world turns out. I want to see all the good things. We've worked so hard. I want to see the good things that happen. And I would like to be able to help my global family any way I can. We're going through some very difficult times. And I think we're going to see more, because there's an evolutionary process of breaking down the systems that are unsustainable. And the beauty is the new systems aren't here yet. We're building them. I'll tell you exactly what happened. It happened in broad daylight. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even tell my mom what had happened. I was just in shock. In those days, doctors used to come to the house. Back in the olden days, I was lying in my bed waiting for the doctor that my mom had called, and my bed was in the corner of a room. So I had a wall behind me and a wall to one side. In broad daylight, while I was there, all of a sudden, I felt two hands underneath the back of my head, and I knew they couldn't be there because there's a wall behind me. And I rolled my head back, and I could see a being behind me that had my head in his cradled hands. And my feet was a second one. They were very tall. They had maroon-colored robes, and I couldn't see their faces because they had hoods.
Were you out of your body?
No, I was lying in that bed. I was very conscious. And that was the first time I became aware of a world that other people couldn't see, that I was seeing in that moment. And that certainly influenced my ability to think differently about the world. There was a communication that happened that has been constant since that time. I know what those voices sound like. As a scientist, I don't talk about it a lot because there's no context.
What do you believe they were?
They are...
I mean, were they angels? Were they guides? Were they...
I don't use those terms. I think it was they were higher dimensional life force, maybe from outside the simulation. That was my first experience of a world that I couldn't see, but that I knew they existed because I was seeing it. My mom came in and she said she didn't see anyone. I said, you can't see these beings. And so the rest of the story, 2 weeks later, I had a drowning. I literally walked into a pool and just kept walking into the water, got deeper and deeper, and just let go. It felt good to let go. And then there was a voice that said, do you want to leave this world? And I said no. And then somebody pulled me out of the water, and that's when it hurt. When they had to pump the water out of my lungs and my nose and all that. But the point that I was, before that happened, it was it taught me what it feels like to let go, to absolutely let go. And that has become a very powerful point of reference.
Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. When did you first meet God?
I don't know. I don't think of God probably the way that you think of God.
Maybe I don't think of God the way you think I think of God.
Well, this is where the Gnostic texts are fascinating to me. And you have to ask, why would they have been banned? And why did so much energy go into keeping the translations public they were discovered in 1945. The Vatican still is fighting to have some of them never be released. They describe a reality that I think is much closer to the reality that we live in. An ultimate reality, if you want to call it the monad, is the term that they use, of pure energy, pure light. I think that's the God. And that there are forces below that have created artificial copies. And there are localized gods. Your friend was talking about, I think that's what your friend was referring to. Very powerful beings, but not the being. And every once in a while, we have someone from that realm comes into our world and shows us what's possible as a reference point, not to be worshipped, but to say, remember who you are, wake up to the truth of who you are. And we've had those throughout history. And I think that's very possible in a simulation where somebody on the outside says, hey, they need a little help, and somebody pops in. And the thing about a simulation, you know, we say you live 100 years, and you're talking to your guides, and you say, thank you, guide, for waiting, 50 years for me to get back with you. And the guides, they're saying 50 years to you is like a minute to us, because that's the way a simulation works. You could live 100 years here. It might be 10 minutes in that simulation, and then you try it again and you try it again to see, where you can improve.
We're speaking to someone who is known in many, many realms as being a person who talks about concepts of good and evil, talks about the codes written into our DNA and into the Bible. And it's like, where do all these things fit together? I think a good place for us to start, and I want to get to specifics of the book, but I think it would be helpful for people to hear, what's your mission? Like, what is your perspective that you sort of enter all of the work that you do from?
My mission and my perspective is to love this world, and the people of this world into peace that I know is possible. It's more than just an interest. I think probably because of my heritage. I'm Cherokee blood and Hebrew blood. Both traditions have known a lot of war and a lot of suffering. I think a lot of my viewers know that I was working in the corporations in the defense industry during the Cold War years. And it was a really frightening time in the history of our world when the superpowers came like this close to doing the unthinkable. And there's no space there because they actually pushed the button twice to release nuclear weapons on civilian populations, and twice the tech failed for mysterious reasons. The whole conversation around that. But I always felt if we know where to look into the past, and if we know how to look at what those who have come before us have left for us, that we would find a way to perhaps end the hurt, end the suffering, end the atrocities in our lifetime that we all have seen in the 20th, and now it's repeating again in the 21st century. And my passion has been to view our past not simply as an ancient and obsolete way of thinking of things, which is what I was taught as a scientist. I was taught, that's back then, we're modern people now. And what I tend to see is a continuity. Is the stuff old? Yes. Are the texts and the traditions old? Yes. Are they obsolete? Absolutely not. And if we can begin to view that continuity, we give ourselves a framework to build the kind of peace. And honestly, I think the only way it's going to happen is we've got to think differently about ourselves. And the better we know ourselves, I think, the better choices we make, and less we fear one another, unless we fear change in the world. So, yes, it's about the world, and really it all comes down to us.
I think we should just dive right in. By the year 2030, we will either have awakened to the truth of our untapped human potential, or we will be locked into a society of hybrid humans that has engineered away our powers of creativity, emotion, empathy, and intuition. This is just in the introduction. I just want everybody to know. This is, kind of the framework that you're setting. Tell us what you understand based on the current trends of thinking. Mm-hmm. What are we headed towards?
There's a theme in the book that a lot of people are uncomfortable with. And the word is divinity. Because for many people, they link divinity with religion. And, I can see where that would happen. There are schools of divinity that do just that, and they're good schools. The contemporary definition of divinity, and this is fascinating to me, it simply says divinity is our ability to transcend perceived limitations. So transcend means become more than. Perceived, most of us are living limits in our lives. They're not even real. We are indoctrinated to accept those limits through academia, through our family, our friends, our community, our heritage, our religion, obsolete science, all kinds of places. But they're not even real. So divinity, in its truest sense, is our ability to be the best version of ourselves. And That's where this book is so fascinating to me, because there is a concerted effort to keep us from doing that, to veil our divinity. Let me just give a couple of examples of, when we think of divinity, many people think it's a peripheral experience. It's actually foundational. A divinity is our ability to imagine. That is an expression of human divinity. Creativity, innovation, empathy, sympathy, compassion, the ability to love.
I was going to say love.
Without fear. Many of us love, and we've been hurt in our love. And so when we do love, what we do is we love just enough, and we always hold something back because we're afraid of being vulnerable and having that hurt again. Forgiveness. Many people forgive, and then they look around and see who saw them do the forgiving, because they want something to come back. Divinity is loving without fear. Forgiveness without unconditional forgiveness. The ability to heal our own bodies. That is an expression of divinity. So what we find is divinity is actually foundational in our lives. It's not this peripheral thing. It's us being the best version of ourselves. The move to replace us with technology veils our ability to be the best version of ourselves. It actually veils our divinity. And we can talk about the science that shows us how that works. So love, the question is, do we love ourselves enough to be the best version of ourselves? Do we love ourselves enough to allow our divinity, which I personally believe is our destiny as individuals and as a species, it's our destiny to unlock these extraordinary potentials that we're only beginning to understand.
Your prediction is pretty specific, that within a relatively short period of time, there's kind of a tipping point that we're at. Talk about that tipping point.
So, well, the best minds of our time now are telling us that unless we change the trajectory,